Welcome to Dad Space. It's Dave here again, a podcast for dads by dads. Today we have Sean Genovese on, and Sean is a podcaster. He is a dad. He has 2 daughters, and we're going to talk about ice cream. We're going to talk about ADHD. We're going to talk about finding something to say yes to as a dad. It's kind of like improv. You know how improv, they're always like, there is no no, there's only yes. So we're going to find some things to say yes to. Let's break the status quo image of dad here on Dad Space with my guest, Sean. Are you ready? Sean's right here. He's waiting to talk, so let's bring him on. Welcome to Dad Space. Everybody, welcome to Dad Space. You know, the place for dads, for dads by dads. It's Dad Space, and today Sean is on with me, and Sean is a fellow podcaster. So I'm already feeling the love so much right now. And Sean's going to be here to talk about, hey, maybe we should just break the status quo of what a dad is. And that's a little segue into Sean's podcast, by the way. But Sean's here with me today. Welcome, Sean. Welcome to Dad Space. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here. And actually, as you're saying that, I'm realizing this is the first time I've been on this side of the interview desk.
Come on.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Are you comfortable? You got everything within arm's reach? You're fine? Everything's good?
Good. Uh-huh. Yep. And my seat's getting hotter.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, welcome to Dad Space. I love having fellow dads on to talk about their dad story. And you mentioned you had listened to a couple episodes. Thank you, by the way. The one you were listening to recently was all around legacy, and some of your thoughts on that one. I think it was with Reverend was on with us. Can you give a little bit of insight on maybe some of the things that stuck with you from that? Because I'd love to share that with him as well.
Yeah, sure. That was a great episode. I was actually trying to take voice memo notes. I was listening to it in the car, so I was trying to take voice memo notes, and I had to pause it a few times to grab some stuff. I loved the story. Everything he talked about regarding legacy resonated tremendously because that's something I think a lot about. And a few things in particular, he told a story about his son on Saturday, getting ready to go, and mom says, "Where are you going?" "Well, I'm going to work because that's where dad goes." "And what do you do?" "Well, whatever dad does, that's what I do." Mm. And I see those same behaviors with my kids in various ways. I have 2 daughters. But he talked about what we're doing influences what we're leaving. And the idea that the legacy is both now and when you're gone. It's not just when you're gone, but it's what's happening while you're here as well. And he used a phrase that I use all the time now, both in my personal life and in business, which is be intentional.
Yeah.
Just and I wrote down kind of the corollary to that, which for a dad is be present. You got to show up at the very least and be there. And sometimes just being there, the kids notice that, and they notice the absence. And I see that if I go on a trip, even if it's just an overnight somewhere, wait a minute, where are you going? My kids are 13 and 15, and they still get upset when we don't tuck them in at the end of the night.
Yeah, right. That's a memory. That's a memory right there. Like, my kids are all out of the house now, and I'm an empty nester with my wife. And we don't have those moments anymore. So treasure those, please, because they don't last forever, right?
And I'll tell you, sometimes it's a pain because they are a little bit older, and so they are more independent, which means they're staying up later, perhaps. Maybe they've got some homework, and so there are times where I'm ready for bed, and they are not, and they see me or my wife getting cozy and turning the lights off, and they're going, "Wait a minute, you didn't tuck us in." But I'm warm and comfortable, and I don't want to get out of bed. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how many more of these do I have? So I always do it anyway. It's like, all right, fine. I will come and tuck you in, because I know there's a day coming where I'm going to be going to bed and realizing, wait a minute, there's nobody to tuck in. They're gone.
Yeah. Wow, what a great way to start a podcast episode. All the dads are like, wait a minute.
That's all the time we have today, folks. Thank you for tuning in.
That's it. Everyone, thank you. Thanks for coming out to Dad Space. All right. It is a little somber, but yeah, I wish there was a podcast back when I was a young dad that said, grabbed me by the ears and said, Dave, I know it seems like it's going to be forever, that these kids are going to be around your house, but there will be a time when you're going to miss this. So as much as it might seem a little inconvenient at times to do these dad things, do them and do them well, because that's what your kids are going to remember, right? So, and back to, the story of doing whatever dad does on a Saturday, it's amazing what your kids pick up just by watching you and listening and observing, and how that shapes their view of the world long after. And that whole legacy piece is so important, I think, as dads.
Yes, for better and for worse. They watch everything. They soak it all up like sponges. Right. So for those new, I know you like to talk to that avatar dad out there, and so for that dad that's sitting in the delivery room right now, waiting impatiently for the little one to arrive, they will soak everything up. Always remember that.
Yeah. As a dad, I think the moment you are announced as a father, you go up on stage and you will stay there on that stage to be judged, to be applauded, to be criticized, to be admired. Your kids will be looking up at you at that stage for the rest of your life. And they are taking notes the entire time. And it is humbling to go from being a guy who could eat food out of a box and watch TV in his underwear before he finally gets somebody who straightens them up and marries them and tells them how to live a real life. And then you have these kids come along, and you're no longer living your life for yourself. You have an audience. And when that moment clicks in and you realize that you have an audience now, and you have to show up for that audience, it's overwhelming, I think, as a new dad, to make that realization that somebody's looking at you and shaping their opinion of the world on how you live your life. And the thing is, when you're first time being a dad, you have no experience. I have never been trained to be a dad, right? You go to the hospital, they hand you the baby, and you walk out of the hospital and you jump in your car, and that's it. Nobody follows you home. Nobody makes sure you're doing it right. You figure it out. And it's a little intimidating as a new dad.
It is, and it's an amazing thing, isn't it? I mean, you think about the things you have to get a license for, the things you have to go to training for, and I mean, if you count it up, I have 20 years of education. Didn't take a single class on what to do at 2 a.m. when the baby's crying. You can't ask it what the problem is, but yet. We figure it out. And that was, I can remember when my wife was pregnant with our first child, having a little bit of anxiety about, well, that scenario right there, like how will I know? You just figure it out.
Yeah. And you do your best. And I think that's the one thing I hear from my kids as they come back now, and they're all in their mid to late 20s, and they're like, I get it now. I understand a little more about the sacrifices and what it's like to be an adult and have all that adult pressure. I didn't realize how hard you had to work when I was small. But now I'm starting to understand it. So it it's nice to see your kids come back full circle and say, I get it now. I understand.
Yeah, and I don't know if your experience is the same here, but it definitely it's different. It's a lot of work, but I don't ever think of it in those terms now. That was something that I would think about before we had kids. You know, oh, yeah, this people say it's a lot of work. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But I don't wake up every morning and go, oh, this is a lot of work. I say that about some other things. And there are some days where there's some more challenging days, let's say, with the kids than others. But it's interesting how, you know, when you're doing it, I'll give you another example. I mean, people talk about having to make sacrifices. I think actually the Reverend might have talked about it, but I never think of it in those terms. I'm just doing what needs to be done. And maybe I'll look back later on and go, oh, yeah, I guess we kind of sacrificed this and this for that. But at the time, that's not how I was thinking about it. It was just what needs to be done. And we do it. We get through it. Mm-hmm. I'm wearing a shirt right now that says, sorry, I can't. My daughters have cheer. That's just my mantra now. I don't think about it. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of things we don't do right now because my girls have cheer.
There you go. See? It sounds like a very cheerful place. I love it.
And we love it. We love it.
Yes. Do you ever do the cheer? Do you ever practice the cheer and do all the things and stuff?
Somebody asked me that. I teach a couple of graduate level classes, and so I've been known to show videos from the cheer competitions to them, you know, as we're taking a break or before class starts. And somebody said, well, do you do the cheers? And it is true that years ago, before they really got good, I would step in as the cheer coach. But I was really there just because my wife couldn't be, or, you know, they needed somebody to supervise the girls practicing. I didn't know any of the cheer. Like, I know some of them, but I don't do them. I don't make them up. I cheerlead the cheerleaders.
Nice. It's a high calling. I love it.
I'll tell you what, I couldn't do it. It's incredible, the athleticism and the gymnastic, the contortions and the flips and my oldest daughter is she's a bass, and I have a hard time. Like, if she's standing next to me, I don't think I could push her over. She's gotten so strong from lifting girls up and holding them. It's amazing.
Yeah, I would definitely be an epic fail if I tried to do any of that. I would think I'd be on the ground in a considerable amount of pain. So yeah, no, I think I love watching the cheer groups just for, again, just the stuff that they can pull off. I'm like, how do you have no fear to do that kind of stuff? But anyway, so you are, Sean, you're a podcaster, and your podcast is kind of cool. I love it. I love the title of it. And you kind of talk about the status quo and more of like, I guess you're talking more like a more business sense idea, but I would love to kind of bring a little bit of status quo discussion into our conversation here on Dad Space about dads as status quo. But let's talk about your podcast first. Can you tell everybody about your show and what it's about, who it's for? Because people listening might be interested and want to come by and take a listen.
I hope they do. I hope they are, and I hope they do. We have well over 5 listeners already, but so there's plenty of room for more. It's called the Distracted Driving Podcast. I appreciate you saying you like the title, because I go back and forth thinking, you know, from a marketing perspective, that might not have been our best choice. But there's some provenance there, a story behind it. I've worked most of my career in large aerospace manufacturing, and so in a previous life, you could say, my buddy Rex and we were both inside the Boeing company. It's not a secret which company it was, and we struggled with the bureaucracy that is inherent in a Fortune 100 company. And so what we did is we decided to start a podcast inside the company. It was called the Movement Maker Show, and we sought out the people within the company that were driving ideas forward, moving ideas in spite of the bureaucracy. And usually it was not something that was part of somebody's job or their daily job, but they saw a need, and they realized that there was something that needed to be changed, and they wanted to challenge the status quo, and they had the courage and found the resources to do that. And so we celebrated those people on the Movement Maker Show. And then I left the company. We relocated back to California, and so I necessarily had to stop co-hosting that show. But Rex and I kept talking, and we both had about a 40-minute commute to work, and so we would get on the phone or on a video call in the mornings, and we just continue conversations. And we joked about how, boy, we should do it from the car. We should continue the podcast outside the firewall of Boeing, and look at all the extra guests we could get, and it could be distracted driving because we're like driving and trying to do a podcast. And it turns out that is a better idea than it is in practicality. We tried to do it, but the logistics of recording a podcast in the car get challenging. So it took the pandemic. It was during the pandemic, finally, I mean, years had gone by. We'd been talking about it, and we just said, you know what? I put a meeting notice on his calendar one day, and I said, we're going to hit record and see what happens. And we've done, I think I just released episode number 30. So it's called Distracted Driving. It's not about driving a car. It's about driving ideas and driving change through whatever organization or team that you have. So it's interesting, the parallel that you kind of drew there. We have focused on the business world, but really, you can have a team anywhere. We've got a team here at my house. We're a team. And so you could certainly drive ideas, drive change there as well. And we're going to look into that for future guests.
There you go. I love it. See, we're collaborating already and with ideas and sharing things. It's great.
We'll give credit to Dave.
Okay, okay, all right. $5. That's my fee. $5. Your definition of status quo is what I want to pull into Dad Space today. How would you define it? What is your big idea for us so that we're talking the same definition here?
Codifying it into a streamlined example gets tough on the spot. So I usually answer questions like that by way of storytelling. And I will say that as I look back on my career thus far, I've always had this little thing in the back. I'm not the guy that you bring into the room and you sit down and you say, okay, look, this is what we're going to tell you to do today, and you're going to go do it, and you're going to be happy about it. I'm the guy that you sit me down and you say, this is what we're going to go do today, and I look at it and I go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Usually I say it in stronger terms than that, which is career limiting. I don't recommend it. But so I'm wired, I guess, with this continuous improvement mindset. It took me a while to figure that out and to actually be able to put my hands on it. I spent 4 years studying the wrong major in school before I changed. So I ended up as an industrial engineer. Industrial engineers are all about studying how people work and looking for ways to make it better. And so that is what I do. And if I look back on my life, even before I went to college, I've always been doing that. So to me, that's what challenging the status quo is. The status quo is inertia. It's hey, a body at rest stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion unless something is acted upon it. So if you're in an organization and business is good, profits are increasing steadily, well, that's inertia. Profits are increasing steadily. And maybe you don't want anything to act upon that. But the laws of reality and physics and economics say that something probably will. And so whenever that inertia is taking you in a direction that is less than desirable, that's when we need to challenge the status quo. We need to interrupt that. We need to be that force that acts upon it to get us back in a direction that we want to go. So to me, status quo would be, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to do what I'm told. And my tagline on, I think it's my LinkedIn or the website somewhere, is no status quo. I'm trying to get a hashtag trend going. So no status quo is at the very least challenging what you're being presented with. And I mean, boy, we've just lived through, 3 years of that, right?
Yeah. So let's bring that over to dads now. Because like when I hear status quo, I think of some things come to mind. I might not be correct on these, but status quo could be the bare minimum, or doing what's expected and nothing more, or punching in at 7 o'clock, your 7 o'clock shift, and punching out at 11 on the dot. And you don't have 11:01, you don't exist to me. I'm done. You're just doing the bare minimum. You're meeting expectations. You're doing all of the things that are required by the job or the position or the title of dad, but nothing more. And you kind of blend into society. You don't stand out. You don't stand for anything. You don't really have a voice. You don't exercise your voice. And you just kind of blend into the community and you're just there. And I think from my perspective, I would think that if somebody wants to go against the status quo and it seems like there's an extra effort to do something beyond the bare necessities of being a dad. So in that sense, then what would be some of the things we can do as a dad that kind of bucks the trend of being a status quo father? So there's a lot of things that could come to my mind, but I wonder what your thoughts on that.
Well, I have 2 examples that popped into my head as you were going through that. One's sillier than the other. One's a little more serious. We'll start with the silly. A couple of weeks ago, we'd finished dinner and we're kind of settling in for the night. It was a school night, as I recall, and my oldest daughter said, "Hey, let's go." Where are we going? We're going to the store to get ice cream, which is not in the norm. Like, that's not something that we'll get the ice cream the next time we put the grocery order in. If we're out, we're out. It's after 7. We've eaten dinner. It was cold. It was dark. We're getting ready to relax for the night. And she was, I don't know, something about how she asked it. Maybe it was her level of energy and motivation. I said, "Okay, let me get my shoes." So, I mean, the status quo there would have been, look, no, this is how we roll. It's after 7. It's a school night. We're winding down. You don't need dessert every night. But I just decided, okay, yeah, you know what? Fine. She's excited about this. Let's run with that. So the store's not far away. I mean, it didn't cost much in terms of time. The ice cream cost a lot. That's a whole nother story. And we drove to the store, just my oldest daughter and I, and drove back. And what happened is she recognized the spontaneity and the fact that was kind of out of the ordinary, because on the way home, she asked me, "So before you got married, was mommy more spontaneous than she is today?" Because
wow,
my wife is definitely the one that's going to be, she's cozied up and warm, and she's going to be inclined to stick with that inertia in that particular scenario. There's other things where she's a little more spontaneous as well, but for this particular example, I just thought that was a really interesting. First of all, it opened my eyes to the fact that, okay, so she's paying attention to all kinds of things. For her to recognize that, yeah, we go through the days and through the weeks, and she does not observe a lot of spontaneous behavior. to the point that here we are just going out for ice cream unannounced on a whim. And that was a big deal. And it is a big deal because she got to see that. We challenged the status quo, and then we got to have that conversation on the way home.
And had you not, the alternative would have been, right? No, wait, not now. It's inconvenient. It's above my minimum requirements. Whatever, right? And then that's a message that's portrayed back to your daughter at that moment saying, how much value do I have in this family where I make a suggestion and it's shot down. It's like, you gave your daughter value beyond the ice cream in that moment. So.
Well, and I really gave her value when I had to pay for the ice cream. But, if we hadn't done that, it would have just been another unmemorable weeknight in the Genovese household. And to go kind of back to the beginning a little bit, what are the things that they're going to remember? And I already see that today, and it scares me because it's a powerful thing. There are things that have occurred in their lives that I don't remember, but they remember them vividly. And that keys me into, wow, what are the memories that they're making? So, okay, you want to go get some ice cream tonight? Fine. We're not going to do that every night. And you know what? If we did, you look at the status quo, then that becomes the status quo. And then that's something that is not memorable anymore. It's just something that we do. I'll give you another example.
For a dad, let's go with number 2. I love it. Let's do it.
So my youngest daughter she's been diagnosed with ADHD, and the way we came to realize that the status quo in the household had become, she just has tantrums. Like that was what happened. She would go to kindergarten. She would come home, and for an hour after school, she would just, flip out. She'd be on the ground crying, screaming. And then she was also the child that, she doesn't listen as well. Because if we ask her to go clean her room, same behavior. She melts down. So the status quo was, well, she's that child. And I can't remember now exactly how the realization came about. I think my wife had been doing some Google searching, or maybe it was me, but somehow we arrived at this idea of sensory processing issues where people take in information in different ways. And my wife's a teacher, so it's not out of the realm of like we're used to that. We all learn differently, so that's kind of a piece of that. But I tried an experiment. I challenged the status quo one night, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to ask her to clean her room. I'm going to ask her to go put her shoes away. Okay, Daddy, no problem. Interesting. Can you go make your bed for me? Okay, Daddy, no problem. And it went on until all of a sudden her room was clean. And the light bulb went off in my head. I thought, oh my gosh, she's not difficult. She just is processing things differently. And if you tell her to go clean her room, she's going to flip out and melt down. But if we change that up and I give her a checklist, what we came to learn is you could give her a checklist or just give her one task at a time. That was something that she could absorb and she could manage, and then she would go do it. And that was a game changer for us. She went from not being successful, shall we say, in school. She's in 7th grade now. To we had to take her out of the special education class that she was in because it was too slow for her. She wanted to go do the elective class. And her grades were such that we said, okay, fine. You know what? You're doing great. This is the best outcome that we had hoped for. But if we hadn't challenged the status quo of, well, that's just how that child is, then we might not have had that realization.
What a great example. That is, I love that, just breaking it down into smaller pieces, right? So there's no overwhelm by a big task. It's just a bunch of smaller, simpler tasks that all just need to be done, and you get to the same result. I love how you unpack that for her.
Yeah, and this sounds silly, but I mean, we had a laminated sheet with a grease pencil in the shower. I Velcroed it to the shower. Turn on water. Wet body. Wash hair. Rinse hair. Wash arms. And she doesn't use that anymore, I don't think. But that was key. That was it. It sounds really silly and juvenile, but we didn't do that to be mean. We did it because it was effective. And I think what happened is it helped her learn how to break things down, which, boy, again, like full circle, as an industrial engineer, that's what I do. My job is to look at what people are doing in a process, break that process down into chunks that now we can measure and manage and figure out how to go make this better. And it's perhaps not ironic that I did that with my daughter.
And also to go back to the beginning where you talked about somebody bringing you into a room and telling you how to do your job, and here are the ways to do it. Now go do it. And you're like, no. The same with being a dad, right? To have somebody come up and say, here's how you be a successful dad. And you're looking at it going, it sounds a lot of status quo stuff there. I want to do more than that. I want to zig when you tell me to zag. So I love how you're demonstrating that in your home, not just in your career as well.
Yeah, just make sure you're not zigzagging in a circle.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Still want to move forward.
Yeah. You still want to go forward. I love it. Okay, so for dads that are listening and maybe their children have ADHD and they're looking for some advice and maybe some other things that they can put into place to help their home be more successful and more happy and more things for the benefit of their children. Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind that you would say, oh, make sure you do this or make sure you watch for this?
I think every situation probably has its own nuance. So that's something to consider. There's probably not one answer. We reluctantly put our daughter on medication, which she is actually not. She doesn't even take it that often anymore. But we looked for all kinds of things. So I guess the advice would be pay attention and do the research and find what's going to work for your particular situation. Because we went through a stage where, we don't drink a lot of soda in our house, but in this case, sugar can help. It can have the same effect as the medication does. So let's give her a Coke before she has a test or before she does her homework and see how that works. So we tried different things, and if it worked, we continued. If it didn't, there was a stage where she sat on a sensory chair. It's a little inflatable cushion that has these little kind of fingers on it, and it's interesting. It's I think of it in terms of lightning. You have this energy in the atmosphere, and the lightning is going to find the place where it can make a connection and release that energy to the earth. And when you have a sensory processing issue, or you're taking in information in a different way for whatever reason, you have to find that lightning rod. And so for my daughter, it was a combination of things. The checklist helped, but then having that sensory of the chair, or sometimes just being able to chew gum, something that was going to release that tension and allow her to now focus on what needs to be focused on. So somewhere in there is some advice. I think it's perhaps just research, check, and adjust, and figure out what works for your situation.
Has your daughter ever come to you with any questions about ADHD, and out of curiosity from her own perspective to you as a dad, saying, like, where does this come from? How does this happen? Why do people think I'm different? Has she ever come to you and had a conversation with you about this at all?
She was very self-conscious about having special accommodations that her fellow students in the classroom would be aware of. So she really resisted that. And that generated some questions. I mean, we explained to her that, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain just works differently. And we went through the phases of, I'm stupid, and, I can't do it. We broke that status quo right quick. Yes, you can, and knock it off, and look, it's demonstrating that that's not true, because just telling her that's not true is not enough for, like a 9, 10, 11-year-old. She's older than that now, but, she would ask questions, not so much about ADHD, because we kind of explained that, but the questions were more concern about what other people are going to think. And so, we found ways to work through that as well. There are things you can do that are very unobtrusive. Those little spinner fidget things that were popular a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, well, here, just take this to school with you, and don't make a big deal about it, right? Nobody's going to know why you're doing it or that you even have it unless you make a big deal about it. And so, that we worked through that.
Nice, because one of my past guests, episode 12, I just have it on my phone here as we're chatting, Sean Fry came on, and he talked about he himself has Asperger's. He has 2 daughters with autism, but he also works with a lot of people. He's got a thing called the Neurodiversity Foundation that he runs, and he works with people with ADHD. And he talked about it in terms of ADHD and other things as not a disability, but a different ability. And the people that he works with, they might seem different according to the status quo of what's around them in their community, but they come with such amazing insight and abilities that once you tap in to that, and like the way you're doing with your daughter is beautiful. I want to celebrate that, because I love how you are lovingly, as parents, uncovering the best way to show your daughter how important she is and how valuable she is and who she is. It's amazing. But he talks about it's not anyone that has any of those things, and people might look at it and go, oh, you have a disability in this sense. He's like, no, please don't say that. It's a different ability. And it's amazing how when you tap into those things, that it just opens the whole world up. And once people have that kind of permission to know who they are and have the support and love of their family and a community around them to kind of celebrate who they are, it just changes everything. And listening to you talk, it just reminds me of Sean and some of the things he talked about. But I love your approach with your daughter. It means a lot to me to hear you say those things. I just hope that people listening and feel they're in a similar spot can go, I can do things better. I've got some new knowledge now from Sean. I have some new things, a way to looking at stuff that maybe I can be more impactful and less status quo with my family. So what you're sharing is amazing, Sean. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I find also going through that journey, if you can call it that, or that realization, it made me a better manager. I don't have direct reports anymore at the moment, but when I did, I had team members that I could tell that they shared some attributes that I saw with my daughter. and then, doing all the learning I did, I realized, okay, this person is struggling. They're not doing well in their performance management. And when I started looking at it, I realized, well, you know what? I think we might be giving her the wrong tasks. I'm thinking of one particular team member in my head. And so I did my best to try to shift that. And that's a powerful thing to understand in a team, in an organization, is that everybody has a different way of processing information. And that means that, and here's just to compound what you said a moment ago, this is where I get excited about it. That means those things that I don't like to do, those routine tasks that I'm going to sit there and go, nope, that's boring, I'm not doing it. Other people don't want to do the things that I like to do that are more ambiguous. They want the routine tasks that, hey, give me that and I'll go take care of it for you. And they're going to do it better than I would. And it's great because they wouldn't be good at the stuff that I'm doing. And so being able to recognize that, whether somebody, you want to call it a disorder, a difference, whatever, maybe it's clinical, maybe it's not. But all of a sudden you start seeing it. Like, wow, you know what? This person is not very good at that. Well, yeah, maybe it's because that's not how they process information. We're not playing to their strengths. And so that's, I think, a lesson that I was able to take from my daughter and her situation. And I think it's made me a better manager and a better leader.
Yeah. And you're demonstrating for your family how to do that so that when they're in the workforce, they're sitting behind the desk and dealing with somebody who is struggling. Their automatic reaction is to go to the place that they saw demonstrated from their parents. And that's their beginning level, right? Where you're coming to that level and learning it yourself. Your kids benefit from that learning and they start there and they go further than you will go. And that is how we get better. That's
right. That's the hope. That's what I think all dads, this best case scenario is, they're gonna go be better.
Awesome. So Sean, before I let you go, first of all, thank you for making time to be on Dad Space. I love having you here. Any words of wisdom that you can impart to the dads listening today? Let's pick a dad who feels stuck in a rut. They are doing the bare minimum. When they get asked to go for ice cream, they're like, meh, I'm watching Netflix and I'm tired. I worked all day. And how do we break out of that status quo this week? Like something practical that we can do that shakes up our routine to the point where we're open to chase after those moments that you talked about with your daughter and the ice cream. What's a practical thing we can do to shake up the status quo this week?
Start small. Just pick something. And I think probably the easiest way to do that is to find something perhaps to say yes to. As parents, we get used to saying no a lot, and that's important. Kids respond well to discipline, so you don't want to say yes all the time, but maybe find something this week that is not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal, that you could say yes to, that it'll be amazing how impactful that is to the kids, and it might not seem like a big deal to you.
Awesome. I love it. Sean, where do we find you? How do we connect? All the stuff. Come on, we need to connect people with you, Sean. What do we do?
I tell you, these days, I was counting it up. I think I've got close to a dozen email addresses and websites. And I think the best thing to do is to go to SeanGenovese.com, SEAN, the proper spelling, SeanGenovese, SeanGenovese.com. There is another Sean Genovese out in the internet. He's a snowboarder. That's not me. But if you go to SeanGenovese.com, I have a landing page there that takes you to the podcast, Distracted Driving. It takes you to my consulting business website. You can sign up for my newsletter. My newsletter, by the way, is this is not what the marketing gurus tell you to do. They tell you to find a niche and focus tremendously on it. I talk about in my newsletter, I send it out once a week, and it contains usually a link to one of the most recent episodes of the podcast and some little tidbit story from me. I call it wit and wisdom. I try to work in challenging the status quo, do business better. I talked about how, Taco Tuesday and recurring meetings have something in common. But I tell people, look, if you're in the Fortune 50 or you're just running a fortunate household, I think that there's some value there. That's my goal. And it's free. So, and if you don't like it, you can return it. It's fine. You won't get your money back, though.
I love it. And so for those that do like to partake in distracted driving, we just want to warn you, keep both hands on the wheel. Be sure you're following all the local laws. Please, this is not a promotion to actively distracted drive. But if you need a great podcast to connect with and listen to, jump over to Sean. And it's a great conversation between two guys who care about each other and care about their audience. So make sure you go over and check out Distracted Driving. So thanks, Sean. Thanks for being part of Dad Space.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Go grab some ice cream. Awesome. Thanks for listening to Dad Space today. Go check us out on all of our social media, YouTube, all that great stuff. You can find us as Dad Space Podcast. Real simple. Dad Space Podcast, whether on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, even YouTube. Email us, dadspacepodcast@gmail.com. We're always looking for great guests to come on the podcast. If you have any feedback for us, let us know here at Dad Space. Looking forward to connecting with you on the next episode, right here of Dad Space. Follow us on your podcast app for more. Cheers. To you, Dad. Thank you.